Good evening, ready to get started with Maseches Pesachim Daf Yud. We are starting approximately 3/4 of the way down on Daf Tes and Beis at the two dots. Today, we're going to be learning approximately 12-ish cases. The 12 cases we're going to be learning are 12 cases that are really shilas in the world of B'dikas Chametz, and many of them will be answered by comparing them to a precedent case in Shas. Just as a mashal, if you could imagine going into a court of law and presenting a new case and hearing the judge saying, that case was dealt with. It's the case of Brown v. Board of Education. Whatever the case is, there's precedent, and that's how the courts make their decisions. Well, they got that model from here, I presume, because that's exactly how this works. We're going to be looking at the world of B'dikas Chametz and saying, hey, what was the precedent? And that's how case law should be learned. So let's get started with case number one. I've written in my Gemara the numbers here. We are going to be dealing with 2 on this page, another 6 on the next page, and we're going to hit up to 12 before we get to the Mishnah. Case number 1. Tisha tziburin shel matzah ve'echad shel chametz. You have 9 neatly organized piles of matzah, and one of them is chametz. All right, so 9 to 1 odds. Ve'asa achbar v'shakal. And there was a mouse that took food from these collections of food. Again, 9 matzah, 1 chametz. V'lo yadi'inan imatzah shakal chametz shakal. We don't know what the animal took. We knew that he took, but we don't know what he took. So says the Gemara, Hainu, this is the case of, what's our precedent case? It's referred to as Teisha Chanuyos, the 9 stores. It's a well-known case in Shas. We'll detail it in a moment. Continues this case in the Gemara. Piresh, if it wasn't part of these neat piles. Let's say you found a random piece of meat. It wasn't in a collection of 9 neat piles of matzah and 1 neat pile of chametz, but it's just a random piece of bread. So then Piresh then ve'asa achbar v'shakal, and he took it hainu seifa. That's the end of the Mishnah of Teisha Chanuyos. What is the Mishnah of Teisha Chanuyos? So says the Gemara as follows. Ditnan, the Mishnah writes, this has its roots all over Shas. It's in Ksubis and Chulin and Nida, as it says in the Maseches Shas here, and of course, obviously, here in Pesachim. Says the Gemara, what's the case of Teisha Chanuyos? Ditnan, Teisha Chanuyos, if you have 9 stores, Kulan Mochrin Basar Shchuta, Va'achas Mocheres Basar Nevela. 9 of them sell kosher meat, and 1 of them sells treif meat, right? We can already see the comparison, 9 cases of matzah and 1 case of chametz. The lokach me'achas mehen, similar to the mouse. Ve'eno yodeh me'ezen lokach, just like the mouse. How do we paskin in the case of Teisha Chanuyos? Sveiko aser. We say that it's problematic. What did we say in our Mishnah? It's just like Teisha Chanuyos, which means that it would be a problem. We would have to do B'dikas Chametz again. However, uvenimtza, what if we found it not near the neat piles? What if it wasn't near the neat stores? So then, halach achar harov, then we follow the majority. What underlays this idea of Teisha Chanuyos is a principle called kavua kemechza al mechza dami. The fact that the stores are fixed, the fact that they have a location. Let's say you go to a section of a city that's all of the meat stores. 9 in a row are fruma places, and the last one is not. And so that's our case. Because the buildings are established, so we have more of a suffix as to where the food came from, because it's very reasonable that it came from the chametz place, right? There we don't say rove because there's a building in front of me that sells nevela, right? However, if I find a random piece of meat and it's not near one of these stores, then I can say, oh, it's just a random piece of meat, then we follow the rove. And if you're in a Jewish city and most of the butchers are kosher, then you're allowed to eat the meat. So that's case number 1 with precedent number 1. The case of Teisha Chanuyos. Case 2, we're about 10, 11 lines from the bottom. It says the Gemara, Shnei tziburin, you have 2 neat piles. Echad shel matzah ve'echad shel chametz. Now the case has changed. Now it's not 9 to 1, it's 1 to 1. V'lifneim shnei batin. So I have these 2 piles. They're in the street. Let's say they're in front of my house, and there's 2 houses, my house and my neighbor. Echad baduk ve'echad she'eno baduk. Now my house is not yet checked, but my neighbor's house is checked. Again, 1 pile of chametz, 1 pile of matzah, 1 house that's baduk, 1 house that's not baduk. Ve'asu shnei achbar, 2 mice show up. Echad shakal matzah ve'echad shakal chametz. 1 of them took from the matzah pile, and 1 of them took from the chametz pile. And then, below yadinan, at this point, we lose where they went. Below yadinan, ilahai ayel, the ilahai ayel. So we don't know where they went. So what's the precedent for case number 2? Answers the Gemara, hainu shtei kupos. This is like the case of 2 kupos. The case of the 2 large baskets. This is a case of chulin and truma. Here's the details. Ditznan, shtei kupos, if you have 2 large baskets, achas shel chulin ve'achas shel truma. One of the baskets has chulin and one has truma. One is allowed to be eaten now. One belongs to the kohen. V'lifneihem shnei sa'in echad shel chulin ve'echad shel truma. In front of these large baskets is a very small amount, just one sub chulin and one sub truma. V'naflu elu l'soch elu mutarin. So again, two massive dumpsters worth, one of chulin and one of chulin, one of truma. And then in front of that is two target bags worth, one of chulin and one of truma. And one of them got dumped into into the dumpsters, one into each dumpster, but we don't know which one. Now the chulin could have gone into the chulin, the chulin could have gone into the truma. But more poignantly, the truma could have gone into the chulin, or the truma could have gone into the truma. We're concerned about the truma. So it says the Gemara, that's the same thing as our case. So it says, V'naflu elu l'toch elu, 3 lines from the bottom, says the Tanakama, mutarin. Why is it mutar in this case? Why aren't we concerned that the truma fell into the chulin, into the dumpster of chulin? Says the Gemara, Shani Omer, I'm allowed to make an assumption here of chulin, l'soch chulin naflu, utruma, l'soch truma naflu, nafla. I don't have to make an assumption that the wrong thing happened when everything is 50-50. No one was doing anything wrong here. Okay, I'm just going to add the chulin to the this and they add the truma to the that, and I thought I did right, and then I'm like, oh, I don't know what I did. 50-50. In this case, says the Gemara, it says a Mishnah, you don't have to worry about that. On this, asks the Gemara at the very last line of Testament base, says the Gemara, wait a second. Amar de Amrinan, when do we say, quote, She'ani Omer, your svara of, I say I can be lenient here. When do we say that? Turning to the top of Yudam and Aleph, that's betruma, which is derabanan. Says Rashi, since when is truma derabanan? Truma is a din d'oraisa. All right, but we see that all over the Torah. Says Rashi, 2 words, dibur hamaschel betruma derabanan bisman hazeh. Huge and important yesod that truma is not a din d'oraisa bisman hazeh. I told you I was speaking with this person of another tradition. He keeps asking me a whole bunch of kashas. So one of the things he said to me is that why don't you bring sacrifices anymore? You don't seem to be following the Bible. The Bible said to bring sacrifices when you do sins. So that's a good question, but we have an answer to that, which is this: it's bisman hazeh. We're not allowed to do everything today. We're limited. Not all of the 613 apply today. I cannot bring a korban chatas nevach. I wish I could. I'd love to, but this Mishnah is a din d'Rabbanan. So the Gemara says as follows: I don't understand. That Mishnah is d'Rabbanan, good, but what case are we dealing with? You tried to compare our case of chametz to truma. The chametz d'oraisa mi amrinan. In a case of chametz, which has a status of d'oraisa, to eat chametz is a big problem. How can you compare the case of chametz, which is d'oraisa, to this Mishnah of truma, which is d'Rabbanan? Says the Gemara, where have you been for the last 10 blot? We're not talking about the large overarching status of chametz. We're talking about bedikas chametz. Says the Gemara, second line, atu bedikas chametz d'oraisa. Since when do we ever say that bedikas chametz is d'oraisa? It may help solve a d'oraisa problem. That's possible. But in and of itself, everyone agrees that bedikas chametz is d'Rabbanan. And says the Gemara, second line, d'Rabbanan, we know it's d'Rabbanan, dimi d'oraisa, bebitel ba'al masagi. All you have to do is that. So the Gemara tried to say, you can't compare our case to truma. And then the Gemara says, yes, you can. Both cases are d'Rabbanan. Good. That was case number 2. So we dealt with a case of 9 and 1, and we dealt with a case of 1 and 1. And now we're going to move on to another similar case. Yes, Michael. Yes, tonight's learning is the Ilui Nishmas. David Ilan Ben Dun. Thank you for reminding me. His neshama should have an aliyah. Says the Gemara, 3rd line, Daf Yudam Aleph. Sibur echad shel chametz ulefana beis batim bedukin. You have one neatly organized pile of chametz. It's a slice of bread after a slice of bread, a whole case of it. And in front of that, you have 2 houses that are baduk. My house and your house were neighbors. Our houses are checked. They're totally clean. The asa achbar v'shakal, and there was a mouse. And the mouse came in, it took from the chametz. We know that it's chametz. That was the case. The case was that there's only chametz. So then, v'lo yad'inan ilahai al. What do we do if we don't know where he went? So then the Mishnah compares this. What's the precedent case for this case? The Gemara compares this to one of the most well-known cases in Shas. Hainu shnei shvilin. This is a very well-known case in Shas, and here is how the case plays out. What is comparable to this case of one collection of chametz, followed by an animal that takes it into one of 2 checked houses? The case is shnei shvilin. It's non, if there are 2 pathways, so let's say I'm standing here and you're standing there, between me and you, it bows out in 2 directions, path A and path B, they both lead to the same destination. There's just 2 different ways to get there. So that's our case. So there's 2 pathways, echad tameh ve'echad tahor. On the pathway, let's call it pathway A, we know that there's a dead body buried there on the path. On the one that's on the other direction, we know that there's no dead bodies buried there, so pathway A is tameh. and pathway B is tahor. V'halach echad be'echad mehen ve'asa taros. One person, let's say I went on pathway A, which is the tamei path, and it made me tamei to work with taros. Ubacha ve'ru v'halach b'sheni ve'asa taros. The second guy also went to the same destination, but he took pathway B. So I went on pathway A, and I really should be tamei, right? And I was osek v'taros. My friend walked on pathway B. He really should be tar, but we don't know. I said I took pathway A. I really don't know which path I took. I was on the phone. I was spaced out. I have no idea. So how does it work out? Says the Gemara, that's a machlokes in the Tanaim, 7-8 lines down. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, if after the fact, let's say that you and I are the two people. One of us went on path A and one of us went on path B. Fine. So it says the Gemara as follows. If I go to ask a shayla by myself, the posek can say to me, Phil, you're tahor. Every chance you went on the other pathway. That's fine. If you separately, after me, went to your posek and asked the same exact shayla, he would say that you're tahor. Now, even though it's impossible that both of us are tahor, but the concept that we learned in the previous case is that when you have one significant suffix, we don't have to assume that you did something wrong. So when each question is asked in a vacuum, everyone is tahor, no problem. But shneihin bevas achas, if you and I walk into the dayan together and we say, Rebbe, here's the case. One of us walked on path A, which is tameh. One of us walked on path B, which is tahor. What's the din? Then tmein. No, he can't have it that way. When both of you are standing be'einayim before me, then I cannot say you're tahor. The mechanism of the kula is when you're separated, because then we look at you as a yachid and we say, we don't have to be machmer on you. We can say you easily could have gone on the other path. And the other guy also could have easily gone on the other path had we been separate. But together, halachically, there's no room for leniency because I know that at least one of you walked on that tamei path. Therefore, the taharos are problematic at the end of the road. Now, Rabbi Yossi argues with Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yossi say? Ben kachu ben kach tmei. He's like, stop with these theoretical mental gymnastics. Somebody's tamei. I'm not playing these games. Somebody's tamei. The taharos are tamei. He's not willing to hear about it. Good. Now, Rava, an Amora, looks at this machlokes in the Tanaim and says as follows. Omar Rava, v'itema Rav Yochanan. Some say it was Rava, some say a little earlier, Rav Yochanan. Bivas achas, when the two men are standing there in front of the dayan together, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees. No, that's not the argument. When the two of them are standing there, nobody argues that that's going to be tamei. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees. There too, if I go in by myself and ask my shayla, and after I leave, you go in and you ask your shayla, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that it's lenient. Where is the machlokes of Shnei Shvilin? Where do Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi really argue in the case of Shnei Shvilin? Says the Gemara, third of the way down. Lo nechlaku ela bevalihi sha'el Allah ve'al chaveiro. I walk into the room and I say, hey, me and Yehuda, we went somewhere together. Here's the story. I walked on one path, he walked on another. I know one is tamei, I know one is tahor. Paskin on both of us. Paskin on both of us. It's a blended case. I'm there by myself, but I'm asking about both of us. There we have our machlokes. Rabbi Yossi, medamele lebas achas. He says that's no different than me and the other person standing in front of the dayan. However, Rabbi Yehuda, medamele lezachar zeh. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the dayan still only has you in front of him. By you, he can be mekel, and by the other person, he can be metame. Okay, good. So that's our precedent. What did we start with? What was this Shnei Shvilin case about? It was about one collection of chametz, two houses that were baduk, and we said that a mouse came, we didn't know what to do, the din is Shnei Shvilin, subject to the machlokes of the Rabbanim. So if you go by yourself and ask the shayla, you don't have to do b'dikas chametz. And if you go together and ask the shayla, you absolutely have to do b'dikas chametz. And if I go to ask about you, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi have a machlokes about that. So if this ever happens to you, ask your shayla individually. That's Ladina. It's in the Shulchan Aruch. We're going to learn that later. That is Ladina, the way that we understand this case of Shnei Shvilin. Good. That was case 3. Case 4, we're a little bit more than a third of the way down. Safek al, safek lo al. I'm looking at the mouse. He has a piece of bread in his hand. I turned around. He disappears. Did he go in the house? Did he not go in the house? Namely, do I have to do bedika? Do I not have to do bedika? Case 4 says Gemara, Hainu bika. This is like the case of a bika. A bika in this case is a large space that has many fields in it. Ubiplug to derbalazar v'rabbanan. This case looks at its precedent for this Mishnah, which is found in Maseches Baba Basra and Avodah Zarah and in Taharos and in other places in Shas as well, another well-known case. Halfway down. Ditznan, What's the precedent? You walk into the bika and it's the winter season, and I know that there's tuma somewhere in one of these fields. Let's say that there's 10 fields. In one of the fields, there's a dead body. Okay, what was I doing? One person said, "Halachti b'makom halaz." I was walking around, spaced out. I don't know if I walked into the field that had the mace. I don't know. There may have even been a sign. I don't know where I was. So how do I treat myself? Remember our case. I don't know if the mouse took the chametz into the house or not. I just don't know. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer metahar. Rabbi Eliezer says about this person, he's not tamei mace, he's good. The chachamim metamin, the chachamim say he's tamei. Shahai Rabbi Eliezer omer safek bia tahor. If you're not even sure if you entered the space of where the tuma is, for sure you're going to be tahor. That's not. We don't go that far of maybe. There's 10 fields. You have no idea where you were. You're clueless. So we're going to say that we presume you walked into the field and went over the mace. No way. It's safek bia tahor. The fact that you don't even know if you entered the space, you're tahor. However, safek maga tuma tameh. There, if you're in that place already, then you definitely could have stepped on it. You definitely could have touched it. That's very possible. And then we would say you're tameh. So that's our case. So how does that apply back? If you don't even know if the animal entered the house, there's no mitzvah for b'dikas chametz. Pater. Done. Good. Case 5, halfway down, a little bit more. All the badak velo ashkach. Let's say you watched the animal had it in his mouth, and you watched him walk into your front door. We had a squirrel walk into my house this week. 2 weeks ago, our front door doesn't close all the way, and my children are terrified of squirrels. Creeped right in, sat there on the window hoping to get out, and thank God for someone in my house who swung at this thing with the squirrel, and he ran outside. So I watched him walk in my house, and if he had some chametz in his mouth, so good, but what if I can't find the chametz? I know that he brought it in, but now what? I can't find it. So that, says the Gemara, where's the precedent there? That is the case of Plukta de Rav Meir v'Rabbana. Ditnan, what does the Mishnah say? Hayir Rav Meir Omer, Kol davar shebechezkas tuma, le'olam hi betumaso ad sheyodea lecha atuma hechani. This is not talking about b'dikas chametz. It's talking about in general. There is a chazaka. If there is a chezkas tuma, it will remain that way until verified otherwise. Right? Let's say that a woman, we know that she became a nida, but we don't ever know that she went to the mikvah. Nothing to indicate that. She's bechezkas tuma. That's why some of the poskim say that when a woman comes back from the mikvah before any physical contact, she should clarify, I went to the mikvah. To undo the chezkas tuma, she knows she went to the mikvah, but you need to hear that she went to the mikvah. So, okay, how was the water? You can ask b'lashon remez. It doesn't have to be like, did you go into the mikvah? Okay, you can ask the question in like simply, how was the mikvah, whatever it was. But we need to remove the chezkas tuma because this is Rav Meir. Rav Meir says when there's a chezkas tuma, it remains until further notice. If we applied this back to b'dikas chametz, how would it work? We know the squirrel brought the food in, but we can't find the food. Chezkas tuma, chezkas chametz. Now we have to go back and we have to do b'dikas chametz. However, v'chachamim omrim bodek ad shemagil lesela or lekarka b'sula. You check, you look around, you move things around. If you can't find it, you can't find it, and you move on. Karka b'sula, you get to the ground level, right? To the ground itself. They didn't have hardwood floors; they're just moving stuff around. Once you get there and you can't find it, their houses were not as big as most of our houses. It took them a minute. So you look around, you can't find the chametz, the whole thing is done. Good, done. So that's a machlokas. That would be the answer to our case. It's a machlokas between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. Next case, 10 lines from the bottom. All the badak ve'ashkach. You watched it walk in the house. All ubadak. You did b'dikas chametz ve'ashkach, and you found it. Can we assume that that's all that happened? Says the Gemara. Plukta de Rabbi v'Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. That's our precedent case. What's the precedent case? Titania sada shenevad ba'kever. You have a field. This is a brisa. You have a field, and you don't know where the kever is in the field. Hanichnas l'socha tameh. A person who goes in there, he's considered to be tameh. However, what if somebody said nimtza ba'kever? Oh, I found it. I found the kever. I know where it is, and he demarcates. He puts a little box around it. So then, of course, hanichnas l'socha tahor. Because what was our concern? We didn't know where the kever was. So let's bring this back. Once we know where the chametz is, we don't have to worry about b'dikas chametz anymore. That would be the shita of Rabbi. That's the shita. Shani Omer kever sha'abadu kever shenimtza divi Rabbi. You lost a kever and you found a kever. What are you going to assume? Somebody else buried somebody else in the meantime. Rabbi says, stop worrying about everything. You lost a kever, you found a kever. So if a Kohen walks in there now and you've demarcated where the kever is, if a Kohen doesn't go over that spot, he's tahor, no problem. That's Rabbi. However, 6 lines from the bottom, Rashba Gomer, Tibadei kol asada kula. Nope, you got to check everything. We need to make 1,000% sure that you're actually right. Rashbag would hold in our case that even if you found the mouse with the bread in his mouth, it doesn't make a difference. You would still have to do bdika because maybe there's more chametz. Next case. This is case number 7 so far. 5 lines from the bottom, daf yud amud aleph. Hiniach tesu matzah yud. Oh, this is not good. This is not good. You put down 9 pieces of bread and you find 10. Okay, you can just imagine the kid takes a Kit Kat out of his pocket and he throws it in the pile, and you freak out, you counted 9, you go back on your camera, there's 9. How did the 10th one show up? So this is our shaila here. What's the precedent case? Plugta to Rabbi v'Rabbanan. 2 in a row. The last one was actually Rashbag. This is Rabbi and the Rabbanan. What's the machlokes? The Tanya, a case of chulin and meiser. Hiniach mana. Let's say you take 1 unit of meiser and umatza masayim, and then you find 2 units of that same food, but you only know that 1 is meiser. So what do? So it says the Gemara, chulin umeiser sheni me'uravin zebazeh divi Rabbi. Rabbi says we presume that the first mana was there, and we presume that the second mana is chulin, and that they're now mixed up together. The chachamim omrim hakol chulin. The chachamim say no. Once you find an additional 1, we assume the previous 9 were swept out, and this is 10 new ones. That's the difference between the two. Huge difference. And that's the sheet of the Chachamim. HaKol Chulin. We don't even assume that the one that you put there was still there. That was our case. We established the case. That was a given that I put down 1 mana of Meiser. But if I find double when I get back, someone must have taken it all and replaced it all because the numbers don't work out. Why would there be more than I started with? Someone must have been tampering. It must be that it's different. How would this play back in our case? In our case, according to Rabbi, we would have said it's problematic. We would have said you have to do, we would have said it's fine. You just have an extra piece here, but there's both chametz and an extra piece. It's fine. And the chachamim would have said that there's no need to do anything at all. Next. Is that right? The chachamim omra kol chulin. If they say that everything is chulin, that means everything has been replaced. Sorry, that means you have to do bdikas chametz. You have to do a full bdika because the chachamim said that everything's been replaced. So now we have no idea what's in your house. The 9 turned into 10. Maybe the 10 is really more. So that was case number 7. Case 8, 3 from the bottom. This is a more common case. Let's say that you put out 10 Kit Kats. This is going to be your contained, enclosed chametz to do for bdikas chametz. Great idea. Umatzatesha, but you only find 9. Hainu Seifa. That's the end of that very same Mishnah, which would be the precedent. It's actually a brisa, not a Mishnah. The Tanya, hiniach masayim umatzamana. The reverse. Let's say that you put in 2 units of meiser and you only find 1. So then, according to Rabbi, mana munach mana mutal, same as before. It's a mixed bag. The chachamim omrim kol chulim. We assume that everything was replaced. Next, top of daf Yudam Beis. This is case number 9. I put everything in one corner. I put it in the corner next to the fridge, and then I find it the next morning in the corner next to the stove. So what do? So it says the Gemara, plug to the Rashbag v'Rabbanan. The precedent case is over there. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Karadom sha'avad bebayis. A person has an axe or some type of tool in their house, and they've lost it. They can't find it. So they knew it was there. Now they can't find it. Habayis tameh. We assume that there is some tuma in the house. Shani omer adam tameh nechnas l'sham unatela. We assume that someone went into the house and took it, and that person might have been tameh. We'll ignore the details for now. But that was the case of the Tanakama. Rashbag omer habayis tahor. Why would he say that the house is tahor? We lost a tool. We can't find it. Says the Gemara, Shani omer hishilu le'acher b'shachach. I forgot. I've lent it to someone and I forgot. We've all done that. We probably all have equipment in everybody else's house in the neighborhood, and we have no idea when we gave it to the person or who we gave it to. Yet 2 days ago, that happened to me. I was looking for something. I went into my sister's shed to go find it. Little did I know it was sitting there. I lent it to her a year ago. Although all of it didn't even cross my mind. Good. So maybe I just forgot. Regular human being, normal stuff. Good. That's one possibility. I lent it to someone and forgot. Or I put it in this corner and then I moved it to that corner. Now, before we go on, this Mishnah references corner to corner only here. But that wasn't the case that we discussed before. That was our case was you put it in one corner and moved it to another or found it in another. But in the precedent case, starting on line 2, the Tanya, all we said there in the Tanakama was that we're missing a tool. Why does the Rashbag add in the case of corner to corner? The Brisa wasn't talking about corner to corner. And therefore the Gemara says, Zavis, why does the Rashbag talk about corner to corner? Mandikar Shmei. Who was he responding to even talk about corners? He didn't hear our question of the Gemara. That was way after he was alive. The Rashbag was a Tana. This question was written hundreds of years after him. So what was even the Havamina that he should be talking about corners? So it says the Gemara, you're right. 7 lines down. Really, this brisa that we quoted as precedent to our case of the corner to corner chametz, this case was missing information. Here's what it should have said. Kardom she'avad bebayis tameh. Tanakama says if you lose a tool in the house, you lose an axe, you don't know where it is. We assume the house is tameh because shani omer adam tameh nichnas l'shamu netalo. We assume someone walked into the house and they might have been tameh and they might have moved around your other kelim. Oh, the brisa here now adds, which we didn't have in our version at the top of the page. Oh, shehiniach bezavis zu tameh, shehiniach bezavis zu mitzvah bezavis acheres habayis tameh. Tanakama again holds corner to corner would be a problem. Now we understand where the Rashbag is coming from. Why would the Tanakama say that corner to corner is problematic? Shani omer adam tameh nichnas shavnu talo mizavis zu b'nech bezavis acheres, for the same reason as he would in the Resha. So the Tanakama now makes perfect sense with the added case of corner to corner, which also makes this case a much better precedent for our case of corner to corner. And then the Rashbag adds, making much more sense now than he did before. Rashbag Omer habayis tahor shani Omer hishilo le'acher v'shachach oshenatalim mizavi zu v'yiniach b'zavi zu v'shachach. He was just responding to the two cases that the Tanakama mentioned, the case of the lost tool and the case of corner to corner. That's why he said both of those cases. This would be the machlokes about our case of b'dikas chametz. We had the chametz in one corner and now we found it in another. So it depends. According to the Tanakama, it's problematic. It's going to be tameh. We assume bad things have happened, and therefore bringing it back to our case, we'd have to do b'dikas chametz. However, the Rashbag would be more lenient. Case number 10, about 10 lines down, 1/4 of the way down. Amar Rava Achbar nichnas v'kikar b'fiv. A mouse goes into the house and he has bread in his mouth. Wow, that almost sounded like a Dr. Seuss book for a second. That was not on purpose. And then you go in and you find crumbs. The Meforshim say crumbs in the volume of the cookie that he brought into the house. It's got to make sense. Otherwise, you're missing crumbs. It's got to look be'erach, like the amount of food he brought in. What's the din? Tzarech badika. She'ein darko shalach bar lefarer. Doesn't make sense. They don't leave over crumbs. Yesterday we said something differently. It's different time, a different shita. Okay. V'amar Rava, and this is very applicable. Tinok nichnas v'kikar biyado. A child is holding chametz. He goes into a place that's already considered baduk. V'nichnas acharav u'matzah perurin. Then ein tzarech badika. Ein tzarech badika. If a child makes crumbs out of a food, that's totally normal. We know that that's 100% normal. They make crumbs. Ein tzarech badika mipnei shedarko shel tinok lefarer. Now, from here until the Mishnah, we're going to ask 2 general questions with about 10 iterations of the question, all of which will end in a teku. And then we're going to look into the Shulchan Aruch before Mariv to see how these things were codified. But let's get started. About halfway down, this is the 11th presented case of the Gemara so far. Bai Rava. Rava says, Achbar nichnas v'kikar b'fiv. A mouse walks into the house and he has a cookie. The Achbar yotze, and a mouse comes out of the house v'kikar b'fiv. Right, goes in with a cookie and he comes out with a cookie. It looks like the same Oreo cookie. So mahu, mi amrinan hainu hayda'al v'hainu haydanafak. Do we say that this cookie, the one that he brought in, is the one that he took out? Can we assume that it is the same cookie? O dilma achrinahu, or maybe we should assume that no, he has a storage somewhere in the wall and he's got plenty of food stashed there, and we have to do another b'dikas chametz. And im tim salomar halfway down. Im tim salomar hainu hayda'al v'hainu haydanafak. And even if you want to say that it is the same cookie, let's change the case a drop. What if it was achbar lavan nichnas v'kikar b'fiv? A white mouse walks into the house with the Oreo. The achbar shachor yotze v'kikar b'fiv mahu. Let's say one mouse goes into the house carrying an Oreo, and he's a white mouse. And then a different colored mouse walks out, a black mouse walks out with a cookie in his mouth. Can we assume that it's the same one? Do we say, Hai vadai achrinahu, o dilma armuye arme mine? Do we say that it's a different one because it's a different mouse? Or do we say no, that maybe mouse number 2 stole it from mouse number 1? Ve'im tim salomar, and even if you want to say, achbarim lo shakle mehadade, even if you want to say that mice don't take from one another, if mice don't take food from one another, that means that by definition, this is a different mouse, a different cookie. Then what about the following case? Achbar nichnas v'kikar befiv. A mouse goes into the house with an Oreo. The chulda, a larger animal, yotza v'kikar befi hamau. A larger animal will definitely take from let's say you have a weasel. I don't know how it defines a weasel or a cat. How does the article translate this? When I was learning it, it would translate as a weasel. What does he say for a chulda? A weasel. Good. So you have a mouse, which is small, the weasel, which is larger. So if you want to say, fine, from one mouse to another, they're not going to steal, but the larger animal is always going to win. So then says the Gemara, Achbar nichnas v'kikar befiv. He walks in and he has a kikar in his mouth, but the chulda yotza, the weasel, walks out and he's holding the kikar befi hamau. Do we say chulda vadai me achbar shkalte? Do we say that we definitely would assume in this case that the weasel stole the bread from the mouse? Odilma, and this is a little gross, Odilma, or perhaps achrinahu, it must be different because dim ise deme achbar shkalte, had it been that he took from the mouse, he would have also taken the mouse. Achbar befi hava mishtakach, then you would have seen the mouse in his mouth. The weasel would have walked out with the mouse itself. Oh, the haraya, the weasel didn't eat the mouse, then it has to be a different piece of bread. Therefore, you have to do bdikas chametz. This is like the ecosystem of rodents and weasels. So we have to figure out how all this works out. And let's keep going. Yet another iteration. We're 2/3 of the way down. And if you want to say, and even if you want to say, I know this is nuanced, even if you want to say that yes, it's true that the weasel would take the bread and he'd also have the mouse in his mouth, what about the following? Achbar nichnas v'kikar befiv, v'chulda yotza, v'kikar v'achbar befi chulda mahu. What would happen if the weasel goes in, he has a mouse in his mouth and a piece of bread on the other side of his mouth? Hacha vadai ihuhu. Do we say that it is, of course, the same? Odilma im isa de ihunihu. If you want to say it's the same exact bread, then kikar befi achbar mishtakach havabayishtakuche. Who had it in their mouth in the first place? The mouse. So what's the weasel going to do? He's going to say, excuse me, can I please have the bread? No, he's going to pick up the whole mouse with his mouth. He's going to pick him up by his teeth. So then who's holding the bread? The mouse. So says the Gemara, do we assume that? O Dilma, Mishum biasusa, maybe the mouse got so scared when he saw the weasel, who nafal, it fell out of his mouth, ushkalte, and then the weasel picked up both the mouse and the bread, but separately. Says the Gemara, Teku. You're asking good, we have no idea. Good. We are 3 lines before the widest line, says the Gemara. Last question of the night, again, a number of iterations, though more reasonable. Well, I guess for the most part, we'll see how practical some of this is. Boy, Rava, kikar bishmei kora. You look up, you have tall rafters, you have that rustic ceiling, you have rafters, you look up there, somebody threw a bag of Oreos up there like a year ago. You can see them kind of hanging off the edge of the rafters. So kikar bishmei kora, you see a piece of bread up there? Tzarich sulam lahorido, o ein tzarich. How far does the mitzvah of bdika go? Do I have to get a ladder? Go outside, grab a ladder? Do I have to go do that? Maybe we would say it's a din derabanan, it's a mitzvah derabanan to bdikas chametz. The rabbis weren't pushing you that far. It's not going to fall on its own. I mean, I know there's gravity, but it hasn't moved since last Pesach, so I can just leave it there, right? Oh, Dilma, or perhaps maybe the Chachamim wove into the din of the mitzvah of Bdikas Chametz that we're concerned even about the what if of maybe it fell, and therefore I have to be concerned about it. Good?
But isn't it like go to the earth if it went from one Pesach to another?
Not if it's still edible. It has to be. Your question. I'm just repeating for people here. If you're saying if it's a year old, maybe the food's inedible, but maybe it's edible. You're right. Of course, if it's inedible, then you don't have to worry about it. Then it's like the dust of the earth. It's not roy lachilas kelev. But if even a dog would eat it, then it's still considered chametz as it relates to bdikas chametz. Okay. It could be 10 years later. It doesn't make a difference. Space food, right? That stuff lasts a long time, supposedly. So if it's made of real chametz, has flour in it, and it's mixed with water, even if it's dehydrated, that could be chametz. That could be a real problem. Okay, good. So there the Gemara is saying we don't know what to do about the food bishmei kora, the food that's up there on the beam. First of the widest lines. Ve'im tim salomar. And even if you want to say zimnim denafal vasi lemechla, yes, we are concerned that it might fall. And yes, the chachamim were matriach you. Go get a ladder and take it down. Okay, what about the next case? Kikar bebor. Tzarech sulam laha'alosa o ein tzarech. Do I have to do the same thing for a pit? The gravity of a pit will never make the Oreos come out of the pit. That's not going to work. It's not falling from anywhere to the bottom of the pit. Do we say, Hacha vadai de lo avida de selka minafshe, Pasha, that the cookies are not going to leave the pit by themselves? So the Chachamim were not matriach you to go get a ladder and get down in there. You don't have to go down into the pit. Oh, Dilma, would we say, Dilma de nachis lemevad zorche v'asi lemechle? Maybe a person would have to do something down there, and therefore, because they may have to go down there, maybe asi lemechle they may see the cookies there. Oh, okay, I know it's Pesach, but this looks really good. I'm hungry. Okay, one last iteration. And if you want to say that we are that concerned, and therefore the Chachamim were matriach you to go down into the pit and to get the Oreos for B'dikas Chametz, how far do you have to go? What about the following case? Kikar b'fi nachash. You have a snake on your property, and he's sitting there with a loaf of bread in his mouth. Tzarech chaver lahotzi? Oh, ein tzarech. Do I need to go get a snake charmer? Be like, hey, snake charmer, I got to do B'dikas Chametz. Can you help me? Let's ask the question in learning terms. How far does the mitzvah of B'dikas Chametz go? Let's say I can't reach Chametz that's under some of the seats of my car, but I could pay someone to do that. Says the Gemara, B'gufei atrachuhu rabbanan, did they only make you do that which you could do with your goof, that which you're capable of doing, but b'mamone lo atrachuhu rabbanan odilma loshna? Do we say that it's only a question of what my effort is, and whatever my efforts are, that's what it should be? Or do I have to spend money on B'dikas Chametz? I can't get it out of the snake's mouth, the equivalent. I can't get under the seat, so I have to hire someone. So that, says the Gemara again, Teku, and that brings us to the Mishnah. Let's take a look at the Mari Makomos here. This is Siman Taf Lamed Tes. I'll share this with you on the screen so you can follow along. Where are you guys? There you go. Sorry for the delay there. Just had to open the file and got lost. So we're learning Siman Taf Lamed Tes. Misha Badak Velo Matza Mispar Kikaros Shehiniach. Now, we learned a lot of these cases. Some of them were clear. Some of them were not from the Gemara. And we're just going to learn the tops. No Mishnah Bruras. We're just going to plow through the Shulchan Aruch and see which cases floated to the top. Case Aleph. This is Siman Taf Lamed Tes, Sif Aleph. Tes Tziburin Shel Matzah Echad Shel Chametz. Ah, beautiful. That was our case number one. Uva achbar v'notal, the mouse took it, v'lo yadani notal chametz or notal matzah, v'nichnas lebayis baduk, he took it into a house. So the halacha is, tzarech lachtzar ulebadko. That was our case, which we said was the case of Teisha Chanuyos. That was the case which was kol shekavua kemechza al mechza dami. That's the principle of that case, which is a law within Hilchos Ta'arobes. That's why we have to do a badika because of the Mishnah of Teisha Chanuyos. Okay, let's skip the small font. Shekol hakavua kemechza al mechza. Good. Turn to the top of the next page. Now we're on side 20. We're in the midst of Siman Taf Lamed Tes Sif Aleph. Being payrash. But what if it wasn't near all the other food? If it wasn't near all the other food, if it wasn't near the stores, near the neat piles, you found a random piece. Then being payrash hakikar mimakom kviyaso unutalo achbar misham. If the mouse takes it from a random place. Ein tzarech lachzor v'livdok to call the parish meruba parish, because there we just follow the majority, and in that case the majority was that most of the things that were present were matzah. Nothing to worry about. Next case, beis tzibur echad shel matzah echad shel chametz v'echad shel matzah. This was the second case we saw. Uveis batim echad baduk be'echad she'eno baduk. Very similar. Uvo shnei achbar v'zen notal chametz v'zen notal matzah. Ve'en yodei le'ez abayis nechnas zeh shenotal chametz. We don't know. V'chein, and similarly adding together the third case. V'chein shnei batim bedukim v'tzibur echad shel chametz uva achbar v'notal. He took the chametz. We don't know where he went. Ve'en yadua le'ez abayis nechnas. We don't know which house he went into. O sheyada shenichnas le'echad man v'nichnas achar b'badak lo matzah klum. He couldn't find anything. Right, that's a weave in. Did you catch that? It was badak v'lo matzah klum. That was another case that we saw. O shebadak tzas me'abayis u'matzah kikar. So in all those cases, eino tzarech lachzor v'livdok. That means we paskin leniently in the case of not having found it when you tried, like the Tana who held it over there. Siv Gimel, hiniach tes kikaros chametz u'matzah yud. Here we saw two shitas. How do we paskin? Tzarech livdok achar kol hates. You have to do b'dikas chametz. V'chein, in the reverse, im hiniach asar matzah tes tzarech livdok achar kol hayud. We have to do b'dikas chametz there too. She'anu omrim ma'sheniach nital ve'elu acherim hein, because these must have been replaced. The Yesh Omrim, which we didn't learn in the Gemara, that's in the Rishon, and we can skip that, go to the last case. The last case is Hiniach Chametz Bezav Matzu Bezavis Acheres. How do we paskin? We saw this was a machlokes in the Gemara. This was a machlokes in the Gemara on the top of Daf Yud Amud Beis. What case number was this? This was case number 9, the case on the top of the Gemara, where we added in the words to the Brais about Zavis, and we paskined Tzarech Lachzor V'Livdok. Now, some of these cases are not so glatt, not so clear in the Gemara, but the Shulchan Aruch certainly decided to paskin like some of them. We're going to stop here and continue with the next Mishnah. I just wanted to share with you something, a new resource that I'm going to be sharing, which is a very brief chazara in writing. If you want, it'll be a resource that I'll post in the WhatsApp chat and in the description of the WhatsApp chat every day. It's not for tonight yet because I had to catch up from yesterday. But starting tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, every day there will be bullet point chazara. It'll take you 30 seconds to chazra the daf in bullet points, and it'll help. It certainly helps me to crystallize what we've learned. And hopefully it will be helpful to you as well. Have a beautiful night. We'll pick up tomorrow from the Mishnah on Daf Yud Amud Beis.
You don't know how far